You heard about Nancy Grewal, and you moved on. Most of us did. She was a Punjabi-Canadian content creator who spent years publicly criticizing Khalistani extremism. She received death threats. Her family's home was torched. And on March 3rd, 2026, she was stabbed to death in LaSalle, Ontario. Her story didn't begin that day though, and it certainly doesn't end there either, because Nancy Grewal isn't an isolated incident, but she's the latest data point in a pattern that Canada's own government documented, but it's one that the Canadian media keeps refusing to name. Hi everyone, my name is Sean Binda, and I host this channel on YouTube called Hindu Lifestyle. I was born and raised right here in Canada, with roots being from the Caribbean. And you might be wondering, why am I covering this? Well, the answer is simple. Because Khalistani extremism has a documented history of targeting Hindus, of targeting their temples, their voices, and their sense of safety in this country of Canada. So that makes it a story for my community as well. Today I want to talk to you about 3 failures. Number 1, Canada's intelligence response, its political class, and its media. Together, those 3 failures created the conditions that made Nancy Grewal's story possible. So how long has Canada actually known about this threat? In front of you right now is the CSIS Public Report 2024, and it was published by Canada's own intelligence agency. It's a public document. It's on the government website, and I'm pretty sure most Canadians have never heard of it. But before I go any further, I want to make one thing clear. Nancy Grewal's murder is still an active investigation. The police have not confirmed a motive, and I'm not trying to connect her death to anyone specific. What I want to do though is show you that the threat environment that existed long before March 3rd is right here in Canada's own words. The first finding is the timeline. This report states that since the mid-1980s, the threat has manifested primarily through Canada-based Khalistani extremists seeking to use and support violent means to create an independent Sikh state. That's 4 decades of documented threat history that most Canadians couldn't tell you even exists. The second finding are the activities. This report names specific activities: the promotion, the fundraising, and the planning of violence carried out on Canadian soil. Canada hasn't just been aware of this threat. It's documented in these operational details right here in this report. The third finding is the asymmetry. So in 2024, something happened. Canada arrested 4 individuals connected to the murder of Hardeep Singh Nijjar. And in 2024, Canada expelled 6 Indian diplomats. These are documented responses to this conflict. But what happened to these extremists themselves? This report notes 15 threat reduction measures in 2024. But who they actually targeted is redacted. It's hidden from public view. And as of this week, March 25th, 2026, the OPP confirmed that for the first time they are investigating potential Khalistani links to this homicide probe of Nancy Grewal. The arson investigation from November has been folded into the murder case, and the Windsor police, who sat on that for 4 months, they no longer control it. The OPP does now. So this intelligence, it existed. The documentation existed. So why didn't anyone act on it? The answer is very simple. Because acting on this is politically inconvenient. So this is not a left versus right argument. This is a structural failure that spans every Canadian party that has held power in this country. The Sikh Canadian community is one of the most politically organized voting blocs in Canada, and they're concentrated in key ridings across the Greater Toronto Area and Metro Vancouver, and they decide elections. For decades, politicians of all stripes have made one calculation. If they name Khalistani extremism as a domestic threat, that is going to cost them their political career. So what do? They stay silent. And this calculation has consequences. The Air India bombing, 329 people killed, mostly Canadian citizens. The deadliest terrorist attack in Canadian history, carried out by Khalistani separatists with roots right here in Canada. The public inquiry found that CSIS and the RCMP had prior intelligence and they failed to act. And what followed was not a reckoning, but it was 4 decades of treating this as some type of constituency that needed to be managed, a political voting bloc that they needed to woo instead of a threat that needed to be confronted. When India presented evidence in 2023 of Khalistani extremists, these networks operating on Canadian soil, the Canadian response was to expel Indian diplomats, to escalate threats against India. These domestic networks that India were pointing to wasn't the focus. And who did we have here in Canada? We had Jagmeet Singh, the leader of the NDP, a man who propped up the federal governments, who repeatedly refused to acknowledge Khalistani extremism as a threat. He characterized the Canadian government acknowledgement of Khalistani extremism as anti-Sikh racism. Imagine that. The Conservative Party have largely been silent too, because for every politician winning elections, that's more important than confronting the truth. There isn't one villain, one person to blame, one party to blame, but a system of incentives that made silence the choice of politicians. For everyone in power, for 40 years. And Nancy Grewal, she didn't have that luxury. She said what the political class, the politicians wouldn't say. And today, we have a murder investigation. So what was happening on the ground while these reports were being written and the politicians were staying quiet? I want to take you back to August 2022 in Brampton. A Punjabi media personality named Jyoti Singh Mann was attacked in his own driveway. 3 masked men with a machete and an axe. He loses part of a toe. He had reported death threats to police days earlier. One of 3 similar attacks on Punjabi media personalities around the same time. The motive? Officially undisclosed. September 2022, BAPS, the Swami Narayan Temple in Toronto, vandalized. Khalistani graffiti. Documented. CBC covered it. 2023, the Gauri Shankar Mandir in Peel region. Ram Mandir in Peel region. BAPS in Windsor. 3 temples, 3 incidents, all the same year. 2024, we have BAPS in Edmonton. And then November 2024, the most famous, Brampton Hindu Sabha Mandir. 3 men were charged. A police officer suspended. All party, they condemned the act. This was the most visible response to temple targeting Canada has ever seen. But then we come to March 2026, and Nancy Grewal is stabbed to death in LaSalle, Ontario. So this is not an isolated incident. This is a pattern that's documented, it's sourced, and uncovered by the outlets that most Canadians trust. Nancy Grewal knew this pattern. She named it when most people were looking away. Her story didn't begin on March 3rd. It was already years in the making. So now I want to talk to you about something, the media coverage. CBC's coverage of Nancy Grewal's death is interesting, to say the least. This was their headline. LaSalle police investigate fatal stabbing of a woman. A woman, no name, no context, no history, a stabbing. Compare that to City News Toronto, the same death, the same day. Khalistani movement critic Nancy Grewal stabbed to death. Completely different story. One outlet told you who she was and why she may have been targeted. The other outlet told you that a woman was stabbed. Let's compare that to something that the Canadian media did want to cover, and they did it extensively and repeatedly and with full context. The murder of Hardeep Singh Nijjar in June 2023. What did we have? Parliamentary hearings, foreign interference in inquiries, diplomatic expulsions, full context about who he was and what he represented and why his death mattered. So tell me now, if Canada named Khalistani extremists as a national security threat using Canadian soil, why does one side of that conflict receive the full coverage and the other side receives a woman was stabbed? Your intelligence agency named the threat. Your political class chose to look away, and it was our media that chose what to frame as a story worth telling. Those are choices. And we see that these choices have consequences. Her name was Nancy Grewal. She was 45 years old, born in Punjab, moved to Canada. She built a life here. She spent years saying things out loud that were uncomfortable, that were contested, and that made her a target. She received death threats. Her home was torched. She reported it. She kept speaking. The police have not yet confirmed a motive. The investigation is still ongoing. And I'm not here to reach conclusions that haven't been reached officially. But I'm here to say this. This pattern existed before her. The documentation existed before her. The warnings existed before her. And when she was gone, the silence that followed was the same silence that made the pattern possible in the first place. So you now know what she knew. The difference is she said it out loud, years before anyone was listening.